So for my project, I plan to have the second part be in the form of a video or a voiceover of a, well, not or, it will be a presentation with a voiceover, and I'll have all the information on there. And so my main topic for this project is the history of fascism. And so what really interested me about like this project was, as a kid I was always really interested in Nazi Germany and how they came to power, and how I was always intrigued by the stories of the people that resisted this fascist movement, and I think it was really inspiring. So I thought I would look at more of the psychology behind how people fell for the fascist movements across the world, and just that stuff in general I think really interested me, not only from the psychology part but the historical part as well. So for my project, one of the main points I plan to answer is, what is the correct definition of fascism? Because when I looked it up online, when I looked up online for a textbook definition, there wasn't really one specific definition. A lot of historians disputed and argued over what the correct definition is, because there's so many phases within a fascist movement, and there's different types of fascist movements. So throughout my project, I plan to try to add on to that definition, ultimately at the end come to a conclusion about what a true definition of fascism is, if it's even possible. Now, one interesting source was the American History Association, and they stated that fascism meant complete state control of every phase of human activity. It meant fostering the idea that the fascist party and the Italian state were one and the same. It meant defying the nation and the leader. It meant the nourishing of nationalistic and warlike passions. It meant, in the end, alliance with the other great totalitarian powers in Europe, acceptance of the debased and debasing theories of Nazism, and finally, active participation within the war. This is a quote from the American History Association, and I think it really encompasses a good amount of information regarding the definition of fascism, but so far that doesn't totally encompass everything. So, and there are still some points that you could argue within that quote. So I think I'll go more into that in my video presentation. And then the second question I plan to answer is, how did they come to power? So how did these fascist movements come to power? How did they fool the masses? And I think this is really interesting, and I could look at a couple primary sources from within some of those fascist countries, and I could look also at least primary source-wise, and then I could look at a couple primary sources from other countries, like what maybe Turkey felt, or well, yeah, how Turkey felt, how other countries around the world felt, other than the U.S., because we obviously know they didn't like the Nazis, because that's just basic history, and so I plan to look that up as well, and I think it was very interesting. And I think a lot of people saw this coming, and nobody did anything about it, especially the British Prime Minister, which received a lot of flack for that. So, in an article from 1938 on the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany, Bruno Heilig states, Nazism has grown organically out of a rotten democracy, and the rottenness of that democracy is a natural consequence of unequal economic conditions. Therefore, every country is potentially a fascist country. Germany is but the type of development which no country can escape except by the establishment of the equal right to the occupation and use of land. Now, I think that quote is really, really interesting, and I think the fact that they blame a rotten democracy and that they say any democracy can form to fascism is extremely interesting. So I plan to cover that more, if that's a false statement, or if that maybe has some truth somewhere inside of that core of a statement. And so I plan to cover that in my presentation. And then some of the additional questions I plan to answer is, what was it like while the state was in power? What were the anti-fascists doing? Was there an anti-fascist movement? What were the police like? What was the aftermath? And then, could there be possibly any fascists in today's world? Like, some people say that Trump is a fascist, and so I plan to look that up. Maybe Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, I plan to look that up. And then finally, Kim Jong-un. Maybe is he a fascist? I'll probably answer that in my video presentation. So yeah, that is my project.